All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Vyzer Visionaries. I'm Litan, your host, and with me today is a super special guest. I'm excited to have Matt King here on the show, dive into his background and how he reached where he's at today, which is a superstar. And yeah, man, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. I'm honored to be here, honored to be pouring into the Vyzer community, and look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. So I have so many things I want to talk about, but let's start from the basics. Like, can you give us a background, like a personal background? You can go back as far as you want.
Yeah, for sure, man. I was born and raised in a small town in Wisconsin. Grew up, have two incredible parents, down to earth, amazing people, and grew up and always felt like a little different, a little bit of an oddball, and knew that I always wanted to be a part of business and owning business and running business, but didn't really know how. And I was fortunate at a young age to work at a country club. I was the glorious shoe boy. So you sit in this like little shoe room in the locker room, and you wash the golf shoes when they're done with golf, and you shine the dress shoes before they go home. So it's a pretty unique opportunity. But sitting in that shoe room, got to know a lot of the guys and got to hear a lot of really cool conversations. One day a member came up and asked what I wanted to do with my life, and I said, I don't know, but I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30, and kind of put his hand on the desk. He's like, look, man, there's a million ways to make $1 million. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what do you mean? And he's like, look, just like a small white Jewish guy from Mequon, Wisconsin. He's like, look, I came up with a hair care product that was picked up by Walmart and has gone viral in the African American community. I'll never work another day in my life. I'm like, okay, so there are a million ways to make $1 million. Got it. At the time I was going to college, then kind of bounced around to a couple other opportunities and ended up starting my own business. It came down to, do I print t-shirts, which is the company I was running and owning, or do I write a paper or go take a test? And very quickly recognized that like one was income and one was an expense, and I chose the income option. So I dropped out of college and still to this day haven't finished. And then, just one thing after another, sort of found luck in my life. And I tell people that because A, it's a way easier way to explain it, but B, it's because it's true. And I believe that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I've done a really good job and continue to try to do a really good job of putting myself in a position where I can get lucky. A lot of people are afraid to step on the field because they're afraid of failure or they're afraid of rejection. I'm not afraid to step on the field, and so sometimes somebody kicks the ball, it goes off my leg and just happens to go in the goal. Now I scored the goal, now I got lucky, yes, but I put myself in that position. And so moved across the country to Washington, D.C., met an incredible guy by the name of Pat Hybin, started working for him, then started working at these things called Gobundance events, which at the time I was 23, didn't even know what Gobundance was, didn't even know what a mastermind was. And then met this guy named David Osborne, was fascinated by him. I rewrote my 5-year vision, said I live in Austin, Texas. I worked for David Osborne, and 2 weeks later he called and said, what would it take to get you down to Austin? So my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and I moved down to Austin about 10 years ago. Started off literally as David's water boy, just making sure he had everything he needed for his meetings, and life was easy for him. And he said, look over my shoulder and take stuff off my plate. And that's what I did. Fast forward 10 years, 34, I have 2 children, a third one actually on the way. By the time maybe you release this, we'll have the third one here. Happily married, still work for David. Today I run his family office. And then also now have the privilege and opportunity to be the CEO of Gobundance, which is a community, for lack of better terms, that raised me, quote unquote, bred me, if you will, because at 23 years old, I started understanding and getting these concepts ingrained in my mind around having goals, having a vision for your life, auditing the people you spend the most time with, etc. And I've just applied that to my life over the last 10 years and now have the privilege of being in the front of those rooms and leading some incredible people like yourself through conversation that hopefully helps them evolve and grow as men in all aspects of life.
I love that. That's such a good, brief background about yourself, man. Love it. There's some things that came up that I wanted to sort of dive into, because I've also, I've been in GoBundance for almost 4 years, and I think since you started taking control of it, it's grown exponentially from a value perspective.
Yeah.
And one of the things I remember from the last event we were at, and I talked to you about this as well, is sort of this goal setting, vision-oriented approach to life. And now I'm curious, because I've not been like this my whole life, and I'm curious, have you always had this mindset of, really meticulously setting up goals and then building a plan to reach those goals, or is that something that's only developed over the past few years?
Look, I've always been very goal-oriented, but growing up, it was goal-oriented around sports. And so it was like, okay, we want to win the state championship. Here's the things we have to do in order to get there. Now, I didn't write them down, but I just had it in my mind, like, here's what I want, here's what I want. At 23, when I met David, I attended a class he led, and it was really about goal setting. And I was sort of annoyed that I was there, candidly. Like, I dropped out of school. The last thing I want to do is sit in this conference room with this nerdy-ish looking guy from Texas who has, a journal in his back pocket. But I was there because Pat Hyben told me to be there. I was there because somebody I looked up to and was my mentor at the time, and candidly my boss, said, "You're going to be here." I'm like, okay, cool. And so I sat there and I took notes. And at one point in the presentation, David put a slide up on the screen and he said this was my vision board, and he showed a beautiful plane flying over Austin, Texas that he owned, and an amazing family and a property on the lake and all these things. And then he quickly flips to the next slide, and I'll never forget, this guy named Vlad raises his hand and goes, "Wait, David, back up. Like, why was that your vision board?" And David flips back nonchalantly in the slideshow and goes, "Oh, because all that shit came true. So my wife's making me a new one." And like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, I literally remember writing down in that notebook, buy a purple journal, have a vision for my life. Because David had a purple journal and David had a vision for his life. I'm like, if it worked for him, it's certainly going to work for me, right? Like, it wasn't like watching a guy dunk a basketball or watching a guy drain a 50-foot putt, or watching some NFL player throw the ball 60 yards. Like, I can't do any of those things. I could try, I could practice, I'd get okay, but I'm 5'6", I'm never dunking a basketball, most likely. But I knew that I could have a vision for my life, I could have a plan for my life, and that would yield success. And so at the age of 23 is when I really went all in on goal setting and vision and planning. I remember my wife and I read the book called Rich Couples Finish Last, and it talked a lot about this concept of dinks, so dual income, no kids. And when you're a dink, you should live off of 100% of one person's salary and save 100% of the others. And so that's what we did. We lived 100% off of my salary because I was making less at that time, and we saved 100% of her teacher's salary and just started to stack and compound goals in order to get us to where we wanted to be.
Did it require convincing, like getting your wife on board with this like vision board, goal setting approach, like living intentionally and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, I think one of the mistakes a lot of people, myself included, make in this process is they believe that whatever they choose to do, their spouse has to choose to do too. And I think my wife and I are fortunate to have a really cool relationship and respect one another. And, what fires her up doesn't necessarily fire me up, and vice versa. And so early on, I tried to like hammer in, like, you need goals, you need a vision, etc. And she was very resistant to it. And so I just didn't push it, right? Like, I was like, okay, you live life the way you want to. You're still going to be a passenger in my car, but I'm driving, so I get to call where the turns are. And in your car, I'm a passenger and you get to call where the turns are. And that's okay, right? Now, over time, what I recognized is if I showed her what was possible with goal setting, that she would adopt it more easily rather than telling her what to do. So every single year, still to this date, I have one goal in each of the gardens of my life that's actually her goal. And it's my goal for her, it's my goal for us. And doing that has helped her recognize the power of setting goals. And last year she ran a half marathon, then a marathon, then did 29:029. This year she wanted to have a kid, wanted to run another half marathon. So like, now she's in this process where she is setting goals, she is holding herself accountable. But it wasn't because I told her she had to, it was because I showed her what was possible.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I've never been that intentional until I joined Gobundance and started to learn more about like how people with like intent build their lives and go after that vision. For me, it was like I always loved being like spontaneous.
Yeah.
And I think, that can be a value, but you still have to have these like long-term visions if you want to achieve big things. So I totally relate. And also, yeah, my wife is, I guess, similar to where your wife was. Like she doesn't really, set goals. She doesn't really think, I mean, obviously she'd want to, but it's not that important to actually go sit down and do it. But yeah, I mean, even, and this maybe at least another question I have, because when I sat down, and this was again after a Gobundance event, and I sat down, I wanted to define our family goals, because our values. Like, we never did that, and I thought it was an important aspect of our lives to have first of all, me and my wife make sure we're even on the same page in terms of being together, 14 years already, and then dive into values. And so I was like doing some research about you and your values, and I was wondering like what was the process you went through defining those values, and also with your wife in the loop, like, was she part of that, or did you do it on your own and then you brought her on board?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, my wife and I did this really cool process. It was kind of like to wrap up the end of the year and then kick off the beginning of next year. And so part of that process was she wrote down her core values, I wrote down my core values, and then we talked about creating family core values and family values. And what was interesting about that is like one of my values is winning. Like, I like to win. Like, I'm just a very competitive person and I want to play the game and win. And she doesn't give a shit about winning. She just wants to play the game and have fun and make sure everybody gets a snack after the game, right? Like, and so we rubbed a little on that one because it was like I wanted that to be a family core value, and she's like, that doesn't resonate with me. And so what I quickly realized through this process is she had to have her values that I understood and respected. I had to have my values that she understood and respected. We had to have our values that we understood and respected. And then our children are going to have their values that they're going to understand and respect, right? And we have to understand and respect those too. So we were in this process, and I had originally entered the process thinking I was going to create these family values, and then we were going to push them down to the kids, right? And what I recognized through that was like, I don't know what's going to resonate with my children. Now, we have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so you've got to be a little bit sensitive, because like my 3-year-old's core value would be like poopy and laugh, right? Like who knows what he's going to say. But our 4, she was 4 at the time. Our 5-year-old was like at a really interesting age. And I remember one night after I read her a book, I just simply asked her the question. I said, "Hey, Rylan, what do kings do?" And she looked at me and she said, "We're kind." I'm like, well, that's a pretty damn good value. And then I asked her again, I'm like, "What else do kings do?" She's like, "We're brave." I'm like, okay, 2 for 2. That's pretty damn good. And then I just like, "What else do kings do?" And she's like, "We win." I'm like, okay. So like her core values are she's kind, she's brave, and we win. So like as she was getting ready to go to kindergarten last week, she tells me, "Dad, I'm a little bit nervous." I'm like, "Man, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're nervous, because it means you care, Rylan. You only get nervous if you care about things. But tell me, what do kings do?" And she's like, "We're brave." I'm like, okay, cool. And then she looks at me and she goes, "And we win." I'm like, yeah, we win. Like, because that's her, right? She just is competitive. Like, and it's in her DNA. It's in her blood. And my son might be different. I mean, he might be the same. I'm not sure. But my daughter loves to compete. And so I didn't push that down her throat. Now, maybe I did through my actions in my life and whatever, but I didn't tell her we're going to win. But she said that on her own. And so what a cool thing to do, to just remind her of the core values that came to her intuitively at 4 versus trying to hammer core values down her throat.
I do think winning is I mean, it has, it can be problematic because you don't always win. And it's okay. Like there's a book I love to read. I only like revisited it when I had kids. The Dr. Seuss book, the Places You Go. I love that book, and like this page in that book is like, you're gonna do good and you're always gonna win, and then the next page is like, but sometimes you don't, and you have to know how to live with that. And I love that, because you also mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation about failure, because I think in entrepreneurship in general, and the mindset of people like us is like, it is okay to fail. That means you learn something. Just you should not fail twice for the same reason, right? And so I think, there's winning, but there's also an understanding and living with failure, right?
Yeah, and look, like one of the things I'll tell you is I think on this journey that I've been on through my life, one of the skills that I've adopted that I'm most proud of is the ability to change definitions. And so the people listening to this are like, oh, his definition of winning is winning, right? Score is 1-0, he won. But in reality, I have the power to give winning whatever definition I choose and desire. And so for me, even if I was on the 0 side of the 1-0 game, for instance, there's a lot of winning that happened inside of that game. I learned lessons. I experienced new things. I had fun. Like, those are all wins as well. And so I think we at times have to challenge the definitions or the labels that we've been given or that we give things to see if they still truly fit us. And your point is spot on failure. Like, one of the things I really strive to do is I strive to make sure my kids fail, and they love failing, because failure is inevitable. But at the end of the day, the only way you really truly fail is if you quit and you give up. So like, I think you're right. In entrepreneurship, we just try not to make the same mistake twice. And sometimes people make the same mistake twice, and then they go again, and then they go again. I mean, like, I was looking the other day, I can't remember this exact number, but if you look up the Dyson vacuum founder, he failed with inventions like hundreds of times. And finally he hits on like the 1,000th or the 1,200th or whatever number it is, right? And now he has a multi-billion-dollar company. So some people will look at that and say, wow, he failed. But I bet you he would look at that and say, I just kept learning, growing, and never quit taking action on the vision I had for my life.
Totally agree. In my world of, tech startups, is like, if you don't have that, if you're not primed to fail, you'll never start a company, because 90% chances you're going to fail. Like, it's always against you, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we touched on those goals and vision, and I love it. And do you feel that you're adapting your goal methodology and how you create your visions as you continue? Because I do remember you talked about, you have your journal, and you have like our one sheet or our goal setting thing that we have in Abundance. In the back of it, you print it out and you have it there and you track it on a daily basis. Like, Has that evolved, the methodology?
The only way that it's evolved is I've just gotten more addicted to it and more invested in the habit of doing it. I would say it's evolved from the point of view of like, I might be a little bit more creative now than I used to be. So there's some days when I'm journaling that I draw rather than write, and I'm a terrible drawer, like horrible. But I was very rigid at first with it. I was like, I have to journal on these topics and these questions and these prompts, and now I'm much more free with it. But it hasn't changed much, man. I mean, like, I carry it everywhere I go. It's right here. Like I carry it everywhere I go. And I got this really cool journal from David that says secret plans to conquer the world. And it's this awesome, like, leather bound journal. Like, and I just carry it with me and have it. And I'm out at our ranch today, just working in a more creative space. And this morning it was a little bit cool for Texas. It was probably 80, and sat on the front porch as the sun came up and journaled and reviewed my goals and looked at my habit tracker and checked in with myself, and then kind of went off with my day. So it hasn't changed much for me from a tracking perspective, but it has changed from like an ability.
Okay. So let's talk a bit about the transition from, all those jobs you had, businesses you built, through that, and then reaching sort of, I mean, how did the whole thing with Gobundance work? Like, 'cause you've been around Gobundance for a long time, and then, like, I don't know if this is out of the blue. Then suddenly you're the CEO of Gobundance, which is huge. Like, how did that whole thing happen, and how did it play out?
Yeah. So look, like, I believe, and I say this all the time, that service is the Trojan horse to knowledge, and with knowledge we can take action, and with action we can generate more awareness. And so when I was first introduced to Gobundance, I volunteered at pretty much every event. These were like 18, 19-hour days, sleeping on air mattresses that don't hold air, eating shitty leftover food, but making sure that the members had water and that the event went off without a hitch and the speaker was mic'd up, and like all these things happened, right? And I was just so privileged to be a fly on the wall in those rooms, right? And to listen and to hear. And like, yeah, I wasn't sitting there taking notes like the members, but I could hear, like, have a vision for your life. I'm like, okay, mental note, have a vision for my life. Look that up, figure it out, right? So I've always been very learning based, and I've always been very curious. Actually, I just completed a new personality assessment that we're looking at using for Gobundance called YOS, and it talks about what your why is. And for me, my why is mastery. So when I get on a topic, I want to master it. I want to get to mastery. Like, I'll go very deep until I understand it fully and I master it. And so for Gobundance, it was no different. I wanted mastery. So I was working for David Osborne, and he's one of the owners or founders of Gobundance. And so I sort of quasi sat on the board, if you will, because I attended the calls to take notes for him and attended the meetings to take notes for him and always traveled with him. So I was always at the meetings. And so I was just a student of Gobundance. And a couple of years ago, there was an opportunity, I thought, to deliver a different level of value to our champions members. And so I went to David and said, hey, man, I think we're falling short. I think I need to step in and run this opportunity. And what do you think? And he responded and said, go for it, dude. If it works, awesome. And if you fail, I'll just fire you. Like, no big deal. Like, I'm like, okay, wait. So heads, you win, tails, I lose. Got it. Okay, I'll take that bet. And so I started off running the champions division, and that was going well. And the ownership group wanted to make some changes and wanted to try to get back to some of the old cultural ways and some different things. And they saw what I was doing in champions, and they came to me and said, hey, would you do it all? And I said, look, like, I'd be honored to do it all, but I'm not going to give up what I'm doing for David, and I'm not going to give up what I'm doing for champions. So they agreed and kind of have given me this opportunity now to run and oversee Gobundance. And it's very, very rewarding. It's a lot harder than I thought it would be to get the culture back inside of an organization of 900 people, but it's super rewarding. It's been very fun. It's been very challenging. It's required me to grow a ton as a communicator, a ton as a leader, a ton as a man. And it's really just pushed me to be the best version of myself every single day.
Hell on it. And there's always a price, not like a financial price. Like when you're devoted like that, I mean, your family and back to the goals and all that's important. Is that like something that there's like a balance that you're still dealing with controlling?
Yeah, look, I think this concept of balance is sort of delusional, if you will. Like, I think a lot of people view balance as like, I have a limited amount of water. I have 5 buckets that need water in them. How am I going to decide where the water gets distributed? My perspective of balance is it's more like an eagle soaring, right? Like, we've got personal on one wing, business on the other wing. And at times when business gets heavy, we have to recognize that and get course corrected back with personal. But they're one and the same. They're all a part of our body or a part of our being, right? The wings are both attached to the eagle. So I don't try to like separate business and personal. I try to just let it all mesh together as one and understand that as I'm soaring, I need to course correct along the way. Are there times where I wish I was there for my children's activity and I'm not? Absolutely. And are there times where I'm there for my children and most people aren't? Yes, absolutely. So it's a delicate game. It's a very fine line. But, you know, what I try to do is, I try to bring my family along on the journey. So they've attended events over the years and they've come to things and watched me speak. And the first time they ever did, my daughter, they were setting up the stage and I went in there for like the sound check. And my daughter looks at me and she's like, Dad, like, why aren't you setting up the stage? I'm like, what do you mean? Why am I like, what are you talking about? And she's like, they're setting up the stage. I thought you do that. I'm like, no, I don't set up the stage. If I set up the stage, we're in big trouble. I speak on the stage, right? So like, she didn't know. So that was really cool. And then the other thing is I do a lot of trips, but I make them all day trips. So there's a lot of times, next week's a great example, where I'll leave Austin, Texas at 5 a.m. I'll get home at 10 at night. It's not the perfect trip. It's not the most beautiful day, but I get to wake up next to my wife and leave our house in the morning, and I get to get back home and kiss my kids who are asleep on the forehead and then go to bed. So like, I try to really like compromise myself a lot to not compromise.
I mean, I like the distinction I do between, you know, the soaring and balance. I mean, I understand that. I think at the end of the day, you know, there's a finite amount of time, and you need to make sure you, like you just said, that in my mind is balance. But I understand the definition of soaring as well. I do think, you know, one of the things that, especially in a community like ours, where everyone is like, you know, we have money, we're fine, like no one's struggling with anything like financial at least, and there's always this like goal to go and get more. It's part of the life, and I know GoBundance, we have, you know, these 6 pillars, right? We can talk about that, but you know, sometimes people forget. Why do we go and work hard and go all in? Obviously to fulfill ourselves, but at the end of the day, it's to have enough freedom to spend time and do those and have those experiences that matter, right?
Yeah, and look, a lot of people look at how they got their first level of success, right? There's 3 phases to life. There's struggle, success, significance. And generally speaking, what gets most people to the success phase is running from something, running from a trauma, running from a fear, running from something that happened in their life. And like, I'm never going to go back to that, or I'm never going to be controlled by that, or whatever it is, right? And so they use that as that burning desire to get them to success. And then they're afraid to let go of that narrative. And so they keep leading with that fear-based mind, and they've that running away from something rather than chasing towards something, right? Like running to it. And so I think like a big paradigm shift that I see a lot of members of GoBundance make as they reflect on their vision and their plans and their values and all that stuff is like, wait, what served to get me here is actually limiting. And if I want to be limitless, I have to change my perspective and chase a bigger vision or a bigger plan, right? I can no longer run from something, but rather run to it. So it's just, again, like a little bit of shift of perspective, a little bit of shift of definition, and recognizing and understanding that you have the ability to stop at any moment chasing or running toward whatever you're doing. Like, right, you have the ability. Most of us are afraid to because we get wrapped up in that being our identity. And so you just got to be careful that your identity isn't like business owner, but your identity is husband, father, great human, good contributor in the community, and he owns some businesses. Like that's a different perspective.
Yeah, the identity is a big part of it. Okay, so you started to take GoBundance and lead it forward, and again, I think you're doing an amazing job. And like, what do you think the next step of that is for GoBundance? And then what sort of from there, I'll go back and what's the next step for Matt? So there's like
Yeah. So look, for GoBundance, I think it's bringing GoBundance local. Like, we're on a mission to bring GoBundance into like the local communities and impact communities in deeper, more meaningful ways. Most of our masterminds and our meetings currently take place in like unique places with unique experiences and require our members travel to get to them, which means that then all of a sudden the member is away from their family, they're away from their business, etc. Right? So the team and I right now are on a mission to bring GoBundance local. We're launching a local chapter model that is going to bring GoBundance into communities across the country, hopefully the world, where our members can access the value 11 times a year with less than an hour drive every month. So trying to bring that boardroom locally so that members can have more accountability, and really focusing on what the team and I call VIA, which stands for vulnerability, intimacy, and accountability. So we want GoBundance to be an environment where people are vulnerable and real, in an intimate setting, meaning small groups, small rooms where you can actually not hide, but actually have to share and be present. And then we always want to layer in accountability. So we're always focused on adding that accountability piece. And I think what's next for GoBundance is really just to try to impact locally the people inside of communities, the leaders inside of communities, because if the ripple effect rings to be true, and let's say we get Gobundance to 10,000 members and every one of our members impacts 10 lives, now all of a sudden we're impacting hundreds of thousands of lives every year. And that to me sounds exciting. That to me is what gets me out of bed, is making a lasting change in the world, not necessarily from a legacy perspective or like a fame perspective, but just a perspective of being able to sit in tune with my own body and my own being and reflect and go like, I came, I saw, I conquered, and I can leave here with a smile.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of investor communities over the years, and one of the biggest issues is scaling, right? And because you want to keep the culture like you started with, you're building like this really important value-based culture. How do you envision maintaining that as Gobundance scales? I think it's for any community, right? It's an issue, right? Like you look at YPO, 30,000 members, they have issues with that scale, right?
Yeah. Look, I think any community, I think any company, I think any family has trouble maintaining culture as we add things. And so for me, it's not necessarily only focusing on the addition. I think what we're going to do a really good job of is saying no to things. So in a community, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of concepts, there's a lot of change, there's a lot of proposals, there's a lot of opinions. And just being able to look at people and saying, no, not right now. No, not right now. No, not right now. The other thing I'll tell you is like, as you're looking at growing or scaling your business, your family, your company, whatever it is, right? Your community, you have to think through like that growth channel and how you're going to grow. Like with Gobundance, we could grow through paid media. We could go on Facebook, which we've never done before, and say, okay, we're going to sponsor ads. We're going to spend $50,000 in ad spends. We're going to generate a ton of eyeballs and we're going to grow that way. And it would probably work, but it would kill the culture. So what we're going to do is we're going to lean on what we call our shoulder tap campaign, which is our members. Who do you know that we should know? It's the same way I try to hire inside of our organizations. Talent flies with talent. So like when I'm trying to find somebody to come work with us, I ask the team, who do you know that we should know? I ask talented people around me, who do we know that we should know? Because look, I can find talent through Job Finder or LinkedIn or whatever like that. It's possible, but it's also very likely to find somebody that's not quite that level of talent we want, or not quite that level of integrity we want, and not quite that person we want on the team. Not because of their fault, not because of their own issues, but just because of like, there's no filter. There's no way to filter that. So the way we'll maintain it is through the power of saying no, and then through like members referring other members that they know, like, and trust and are good fits for this organization.
All right, that's awesome. Okay, so if I ask Matt King, where's Matt King in 15 years?
Yeah.
What do you...
Look, man, in 15 years, we're definitely still in Austin, Texas. Our daughter would be 20, so she's in college. Our son would be 18, so he's in college or just getting ready to. And our youngest would be turning 15, so she's probably getting the nicest car of the bunch because she's the little girl. And I would tell you that I'm still running businesses. I'm still building businesses. I'm still growing. I love working with people, like building teams and helping change their lives and their destiny. I would say I'm still standing on a soapbox telling every single person I meet, have a vision for your life, set goals, have a vision for your life, set goals. And then I would tell you that I'm just very present in my body. Like that's one of the things I'm really trying to focus on right now. Is it's very easy from an entrepreneurial perspective to think about that next thing, right? But I'm not going to get a next kindergarten first day with my daughter. Like she's only got one of those. And so what I'm trying to do, and hopefully we'll have gotten close to mastery in 15 years on, is just being more present in my body and just understanding that this life I have is all just moments in time, and I should stop, take the pictures, enjoy the moments, and then keep letting life flow through me, rather than feeling this desire to constantly have to be thinking ahead.
That's such a great answer, man. I love it. Matt, thank you so much for hopping on the call. I really appreciate it. This has been super interesting. Is there anything you want to add sort of for our audience?
No, look, man, the only thing I would add is what you're doing with Vyzer and what your community is doing with Vyzer, I think is very needed. I think that there's so many people in this world that are operating blind from an investment perspective and an investment decision. There's a lot of people that put money in places and don't understand or hold it accountable. And I think what you guys are doing is incredibly powerful, and I'm excited to see you guys continue to make an impact and a ripple in the financial community to help people make better, more educated decisions on what they should be doing with their assets.
I appreciate that. Thank you, man. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us, and until next time.